What is up, guys and girls of YouTube? It is your boy Justin Omoe, and today, well yesterday, I made the Solid State Logic Fusion into a FL Studio plugin, as you see right there, as well as on the MacBook. I just wanted to show you that it's compatible on Windows and Mac. Some people don't get it. I've owned the Solid State Logic Fusion for over 3 years, and every single time I use it, it never fails to say, "You're great." And speaking of the mastering gear, if you do want to get your song mastered by your boy Justin Omoe, hit your boy up at JustinOmoe.com. And if you do want this plugin, of course, stick along till the end where I'll tell you how to get this stuff, thing. But in this video, I will show you how I created it, and then I'll show you a demonstration of it. And hey, we're gonna even compare it to the actual hardware and see how it works out and how it feels. Since we're creating this as a plugin, I don't really care for the whole insert signal chain as well as the mid-side or pre-mode, so we'll follow the first signal flow. First off, going to open up Patcher in the effects slot, gonna go to Surface, right click, select Control Creator. This is where I'll create a SSL style knob. I did mess up with one small part, and it sucks that I can't really go back without having to reconnect everything. Wish FL Studio could update the patcher. I got a list of things to talk about, but anyways, this is how the knobs are here. Also have to make buttons for the activation as well as the transformer and the full bypass. The first effects that we have to tackle here will be the input and the output trim, aka the gain. Notice that we need a 12 plus or minus decibels to work with, meaning that I can't use the Fruity Balancer since its max is 5.6 increase. So the next best thing would be the Parametric EQ2 since it could do plus 18 up and down. I'll stay true to the knobs and keep it at 12 though. Going to copy the value here, and in the XYZ controller under the X output, I'll set the lowest point, aka the knob at the lowest, for minus 12 decibels. Gonna do the same for plus 12. Gonna hook it up into the EQ's main input and test out the knob to see how it works. Exactly how we want it to, except the slow reaction, which happens because of the global speed, so make sure to set that to the fastest, and we're good to go. It's just rinse and repeat for the output. After the input, you have the high pass filter, which is what we use to roll off any unwanted low end frequencies. We have 4 settings for this: off, 30, 40, and 50 Hertz. Real quick, since I did not mention it, I changed this knob to only have 4 settings by adjusting the rulers to show 4, the max value is 3, and the movement speed to 1. So when I move, it only moves 1 knob value, which is how it works on the actual hardware. So what I'm doing now is adjusting the knobs to see on the X chart where the value will fall on. So when I make my 4 points for the 4 different frequencies, it'll move to there. Setting the points to hold will allow us to have the absolute value until we snap to the next knob function. So now it's just move the knob to adjust the value into place and we'll be finished there. For the vintage drive, we don't have an exact telling, but we can see the keywords such as soft compression, peak rounding, and saturation. There is harmonics, but that will come with the saturation part, so I'm not really worried about that. Here's our first instance of the Fruity Balance in action. This is how we'll create our in switch for our effects to be applied or passed, depending on whatever you use it for. To do this, we have to have 2 Fruity Balances, and we also have 2 IXIs to turn the volume to 0 to negative infinity, and the other will do the exact opposite. So when one signal is dead, the other one's alive. On to go to the next circuit being the delay 3 for saturation, and the off will go straight to the output for now. Obviously, we don't want delay, but here's the example of the button in action. For the peak rounding, we're going to throw in a soft clipper. Going to activate the drive knob to link a new IXIs for that, but I do have to define the limits, which I do by ear. Same old copy and paste into the graph, then I link the controller to the feedback level here. For the density knob, I'm going to adjust the saturation's knee, as well as the soft clipper's threshold at the same time. This will give a more dense signal. For the threshold, I had to do the signal backwards and gave it tension, so the higher we go, the more threshold we soft clip into. The violet EQ is easy. Don't let the 4 knobs intimidate you. It's pretty much set up 4 frequency values like we did with the high pass filter, but twice. one for the low and one for the high. Then set the gain for the low and high knobs and done deal. First up though, I have to link the in and out so that we have a fluid chain. So we have the drive off and the violet EQ on. I did mess up here. The soft clipper is supposed to go into the balancer instead of straight to the EQ. I fixed it later though. For the low and high dB function, it's the same as the in and out trim, so nothing really to it. For the knobs, I didn't show this, so I'll do it now. To make things easy, I'm setting a range from 0 to 100 and having 50 set for the default. So when we reset or middle click the knob, it'll fall to 50. So in our case, that'll be 0 decibels, so no boosting or reducing. I went the extra mile for the EQ's frequency because looking at the chart, we could see a sort of slope increase. What I did here was set up the knob to work with both the X and Y value at the same time, and similar to setting up the frequency with the hold envelopes, but with the bandwidth instead. This time we have two values being able to output in the ICSI controller rather than just the X value. Cool stuff. The high is the same as the low, so no need to show all of that. For the high frequency compressor, it's simple. Use the multi-band compressor for both the high compression as well as for the crossover of the frequencies. You gotta bypass the low and the mids because we're not using it. Only tricky part was to cross over both the highs along with the upper mid section so that we don't lose any frequencies in the song when we adjust the X over. The stereo imager is going to require a mid side EQ to boost the sides for the width and to boost the lower end of the sides for the space. The trick here is to split the signal into a mid and a side, then sum it back together afterwards. This way we can set the controllers on only the sides and leave the mid alone. I jacked the stereo shaper from a preset from FL Studio, so I didn't have to do too much work. But anyways, this will allow me to split the mid and side and do my thing. Same ICSI's controller, one for the overall side boost, the other for the lower frequency boost. I based the boost on ear since there's no chart for that either. The last circuit is the transformer, which is a simple button, so nothing hard here. I use an EQ here based off the picture, but I do add more layer on in the end when checking and testing back the functions. The SSL transformer is their signature sound, so it makes sense not to really give every detail out for that function. Almost all of the functions are finished, so what I'll do now is double check everything, making sure the signal is right, and then style up the gear and give it labels. The last thing is the bypass all button, which is extremely simple. Two balancers. When bypass is off, the signal goes into the input trim EQ and it flows through the chain. When the bypass is on, the signal goes straight to the end, no connections to anything. After that, I did the small details to make the GUI look pretty. I added numbers on the end after I finished the recording, but other than that, it's all set. All that's left is to just test and play with it to see in the end result. You can see here I add the EQ and compressor to the transformer bit after testing it to give my own flavor at the end. Let's go ahead and test out the plugin and see how it works, how it feels. There you go. So now you've seen how the plugin works. Let's go ahead and test it out with the actual hardware. Completely ignoring the fact that the BetterMaker for some reason is upside down. What we are going to do is use just the Solid State Logic Fusion, that means no insert, to copy the values from the plugin onto here. Now keep in mind the HF compressor has different settings than the High 5 compressor over there because the way the threshold thing was, you know. Actually, I think that's it right there. So it does sound a little bit louder, although we are going to do an A/B comparison with the plugin and the hardware now, and I may have to adjust the compressor to kind of get the same result. So let's keep an ear out for that. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and just swap between the plugin and the hardware. So obviously there's a crunch in the hardware. The bass, I guess, the saturation is really hitting and it's crunchy, and that's good in terms of crunch, obviously. So this is the Solid State Logic plugin that I created from FL Studio's Patcher, all with the plugins from FL Studio, of course, so no need to download third-party plugins or even buy the Solid State Logic plugin itself. You know, that's a whole hand and a foot. 3 different ways you could get this plugin here. First off, if you are a cheapskate, go ahead and just watch the video and recreate it yourself. It won't be too hard, and once you get the knack of it, it'll be cool, it'll be fun. Second way, I do have it for sale on my website as a plugin, you know, by itself. If you want to support your boy by just buying the plugin, go ahead and do that. And the third and most recommended option is go ahead and check out the video course series that I created on my website, of course, justinomoe.com, where I teach you guys and girls how to make music from the ground up in the best way teaching possible. I don't use textbook terms, and I don't, you know, read off a book. Obviously, I give you straight up from my head and make it as easy as possible for you to learn and understand. Not to mention, I'll be able to put more videos, so if you want to learn how to use Patcher, I could put that exclusively on that website for you to see. So one-time purchase, and guess what? The SSL plugin and many other plugins will be free there if you do purchase the video course series. And yes, you heard me right, I will be emulating my whole mastering rack gear pretty much, but I will also be emulating perhaps things like the Shadow Hills mastering compressor, which is going to be interesting to see. Once again, thank you so much. It is your boy Justin Omoe, and with that being said, peace. I'm out, and please have yourselves a damn good one.